Buddy, this is Jeff Martin with Magic City Books. We are so thrilled to have you here for our weekly Thursday night event. We've been doing Monday and Thursday night events pretty much weekly, sometimes with an extra day added in since April. And we had one last night, a special Wednesday event with Laura Prescott, which is really fun. And I want to tell you about a couple things coming up. We're going to continue this Monday, Thursday thing for a while. I would imagine at least through September. All of those events are free and open to the public, save for one or two. One of those that is not actually is on Monday. We're going to be talking with Colson Whitehead on Monday night. And it's $10. Half that money goes to the John Hope Franklin Center for Reconciliation, which is doing a lot of important work here in Tulsa and has been for a long time, dealing with race relations and historic Greenwood and dealing with the repercussions of the Tulsa Race Massacre of 1921 and all these different things. So $5 from every ticket you buy to Colson Whitehead goes directly to them. So that's on Monday night. And another cool thing about that is the moderator for that is a journalist named Ben Montgomery, who works for the Tampa Bay Times. And he's actually an Oklahoma native. And Ben did the reporting that Colson used to write The Nickel Boys. So they have not had a conversation in public together. So that should be a really interesting, fun event. So I hope you'll join us on Monday. And then lots of cool stuff coming up for the next few months. So go to our website. I won't give you the full rundown, but it's magiccitybooks.com. And you can see that. We're still doing also our literary care packages, which a lot have been, I think we've sent them to at least 45 states around the country, which has been great. We were doing our solo shopping hours when we were closed, and you guys liked that so much, we decided to keep Sundays closed and preserve that just for solo shopping. So you can go onto our website and book a whole hour and have the store all to yourself for an hour on Sundays. That's really fun, and we'll pick your favorite music and you can just have a blast. So so do that. Yeah, pretty fun. So I'm really, really excited today to be talking with Emma Straub. I've been a big fan of her for a long time, not of course just for her wonderful writing, but for her advocacy as a bookseller from Books Are Magic. I've had the opportunity to go to Books Are Magic probably 5 or 6 times, and it's truly one of the great bookstores in the country, and has become one quite quickly. I mean, it's not, how long has the store been around now, Emma?
It's so funny. So we turned 3 on May 1st, but we were talking to Michael, who's our events manager, last week, and I said something. Well, I said, in the last 3.5 years, and then I realized, oh no, it hasn't been a whole other half a year. It's only been another month, really. It just feels like it's been 6 months since.
Yeah, time is a weird thing right now. But we're here to talk with Emma about her wonderful new book, All Adults Here. And I guess, I kind of stepped on the intro, but I want to say a big, big welcome to our friend Emma Straub. Hello, Emma. Welcome to Tulsa virtually.
Thank you for having me. I've never been to Tulsa, virtually or otherwise. So I'm very
check
excited.
One of those boxes off of your virtual. Can we have a virtual bucket list? I don't think about that. So congratulations on the book. I've talked to so many writers who have been, kind of dealing with, putting a book out into a world that they hadn't anticipated. I actually saw you speak in Baltimore at the Winter Institute. And, at that moment, no one was, that wasn't that long ago, actually. And it seems like a totally different world. We were talking about all these things you guys were going to be doing. And I think you mentioned book tour and all these things that were going to be happening. And you were on a panel with James McBride and
Julia Alvarez.
Julia, it was an amazing panel. And David Simon, who created the
and Eric Larson.
Yeah. Eric Larson actually that's just so funny actually that you say that, because Eric Larson was our last event before things went crazy. And actually his event was the event we had to I'm sure you went through this too, where you go, when do we cancel? And it was it was the last event. So he actually came here and we did it in an empty auditorium. And we had sold, hundreds and hundreds of tickets for him. And so we did it in an empty synagogue and live streamed it. That was our first ever live stream. And he was in conversation with our mayor.
Oh my God.
So you had the mayor and Eric Larson in this room, and it felt like this strange moment that I'll probably look back on always as kind of this AD, BC
Yeah.
kind of split. Did
No.
you have a thing like that where you guys
So
had?
that last week, before we packed things up, we had three events that week. We had two giant offsite events. We had Glennon Doyle
Yeah.
at a church nearby with hundreds of people, and it was at the point where I didn't hug them like I would have hugged Glennon and Abby, because they are amazing people and I love them, and I've met them several times and we were very excited, but I didn't. So we were like aware enough not to do that. And we had like huge industrial size things of hand sanitizer at the front when people checked in. Then the next day we had Jason Reynolds and Ibram Kendi for Stamped the Remix. And it was an incredible event, and I am so glad that we had it. I mean, I learned so much. I mean, I'd read the book in anticipation of them coming, and
This is Stamped from the Beginning. If people don't know what we're talking about, that's
Yeah.
been hugely important in the conversation that's been happening these past weeks, especially.
Yeah, and I mean, and I will admit that I did hug Jason Reynolds. I did. I hugged him because, like many other humans, most other humans, I have a crush on Jason Reynolds, and I hugged him. I
Yeah.
did.
But you're okay. You're okay. He's
Thanks.
okay.
He was okay. But then the next night in the store, we had Myra Kalman, who is one of my lifelong heroes. And that one was really teetering, where it was a much smaller crowd than it would have been. And we all really kept our distance, and everyone who was there, there were two women who were there who I've known for a long time, who, like me, are native New Yorkers. And they both said, I felt like I had to come because I don't know, because she is so New York to me, and like the New York that I love. And I don't know when we're going to get back to that. So it felt to me sort of poetic to have Myra
kind of close that chapter of whatever that life was.
Yeah. But I mean, I really look forward to getting back to events in person someday.
How many events did you guys average a year? Because we do about 120, something like that.
I mean, 300.
Yeah, and that 120 to us seems like impossible almost. So.
Yeah, I mean, we do a lot. We have events nearly every day in the store. And then we have offsites sometimes if it's too big, and we have, story times for kids. But now, we're more trying to pare back.
How quickly did you guys pivot to being able to do virtual thing? Like, obviously we kind of all were kind of struck by this strange moment in our life, but it seems like you guys were fairly quick to move into that space.
So I'm 40, and I turned 40 in quarantine, and I am the old lady in the store. Thank God, because it means that my staff is young and smart. And they all figured out how to do things, but our events team in particular figured out how to shift things over so well. I mean, it's astonishing to me, how well they did it. And what's funny is our events director, he learned how to use Zoom so well that like a few weeks in, or like a month in, some other organization, I can't remember who, asked him to come and teach them how to do it.
Like a Zoom master.
Yeah, I mean, but I think, I mean, I think that what's nice about bookstores is that, and I hope you feel this way too. I certainly feel this way, is that like when you're new, there are so many people to ask, and people really will tell you, I have yet to encounter like any state secrets where people won't say, oh, you should use this program, or here's what we do, or, that kind of
That's
thing.
interesting, actually, because, you would think, and I think perhaps some people would assume in a place like Brooklyn, for example, where there are a lot of bookstores, and there's new ones, happening all the time, that it would be this really competitive environment. Actually, there's a couple of bookstores opening here, and people ask me often, am I nervous about it, or should I feel threatened? And I'm very much of the mindset that your bookstore, any bookstore like yours and ours, is a return to what bookstores were intended to be originally, which is we thought of them for the last 30 years as targets, basically. Mm-hmm. But in the history before that, they were a neighborhood. They were kind of tailored to wherever they were, and a city would have a bunch that would make up this kind of mosaic.
Yeah.
It seems like there is a bit of a return to that.
I think, I mean, that's such a beautiful way to put it. Yeah, I mean, I think that, when we opened, it was because the bookstore in our neighborhood that I had worked at in my 20s was closing, and they were closing for no sad reasons. Like the owners retired after 35 years of running an independent
bookstore, right? Book court.
Yeah, book court. And that was the only reason that we opened it, because we didn't want to move, and we wanted to live in a neighborhood with a bookstore, and we and I think we thought we could do a good job. But yeah, I mean, we did, I mean, totally honestly, I mean, we talked to all of the other independent bookstores in the city, really, or in Brooklyn. And then, I know some people who own bookstores in Manhattan. So, I mean, I talked to a lot of people. And truly the only area where there is sometimes competition is for events, like, I mean, like you're having Colson, on Monday, you said, and when someone like that publishes a book, we all submit event requests, and the publisher gives it to one of us, and sometimes it's someone who we really, really, really want to host, and we don't get it, and we're so sad. But I mean, I think that I've also like sort of relaxed about that as time has gone on. But now certainly, I mean, and pretty much from the beginning, other than like I really wanted us to have like a gangbuster first, year, let's say. But I would say since then, what matters to me most is that we have the right events, and that, are like the publishers really do a good job with us of trying to sprinkle it around. And it often has to do for us in Brooklyn about like who has relationships with the biggest places. And so like Greenlight in Fort Greene and Prospect Leopards Gardens has like this giant place that fits thousands and thousands of people. And, the place that we have that fits the most people fits about 900. So, that's how it goes sometimes. And that's okay.
It's interesting, actually, because, last year, and we were talking about this before we came on, our bookstore functions a little bit differently, and it's kind of a nonprofit model, but it's similar to Housing Works Books, which is in New York. We use them as kind of a model for what we do. But events play such a big role. People may not realize this, but probably if we took 2 of our larger events out last year, that's the difference for us between kind of being in the red and the black. We had an event with Rachel Maddow last year, with thousands of people. And we had a couple of other large ones like that, that when you really look at that, that's kind of what tipped the scale.
Oh yeah.
So we've kind of had to rethink that whole model, because no matter what these virtual events become, they're never going to be kind of that cash cow that a 5,000 person event could be,
Yeah, yeah. And I think that's the hardest. That's, I mean, that what's so hard right now is figuring out that stuff while we're so busy figuring out just how to do what we're doing right now. I think, yeah, this is
it's a weird moment. I do want to talk about the book though. All adults here. One of the things that I've been really fascinated with your career and kind of seeing it progress, one is of course that you're able to actually produce these books while you're doing all this other stuff too, not to mention being a mom. But that it feels like you've kind of created a kind of a world for yourself. Like your books, of course, they're all different, but they kind of feel like of this kind of Emma Straub extended universe, that people I think want to keep returning to. And I think that you've done something. I turned 40 in 2 weeks, so we're right about the same here. But
happy birthday.
yeah, thank you. When it feels like a little bit of you've done something that you've thrown back to a way that we don't really think about anymore. Books about grown-ups that are truly, domestic stories about real people with real problems. And yet you've somehow been able to do that and have success with it. And it doesn't have to kind of lean on genre or anything like that. I think about someone like Ann Tyler or some people that had these certain careers that you just don't see as much anymore. And people really, unfortunately, have to kind of dip into genre too much. Is that something that's...
Even if it's not genre, I think that people do, I can tell you as a bookseller, people love a high concept book, like people, something like, I don't know.
Like an Underground Railroad.
Like the Underground Railroad, or like A Year of Rest and Relaxation, or Station 11, like people love those books that are, that maybe flirt with genre. But really it's this, just slightly altered, world that has this amazing hook, and it's true. My books are not like that, and I just couldn't. I spent my 20s trying to write different genres. I wrote a mystery novel, which turns out it's really hard to do properly. I wrote a fantasy novel, which is even harder to do properly. And then I don't know. I tried to do a lot of things. And even my first novel, which did get published, Laura Lamont's Life in Pictures, it was a historical novel about a woman in the Hollywood studio system, an actress. And that, it wasn't, I guess the genre was historical fiction, but, it was me like trying to fit my thoughts into a certain container. And it wasn't until I wrote The Vacationers, which was my second novel, that I tried writing a book that was just in my own voice,
right.
That was in my own voice with my own sense of humor, and much closer to my own experiences. And I don't know if it was that or the fact that it was called The Vacationers and had this delicious cover. Yeah. But, Laura Lamont, like 7 people bought Laura Lamont, and a lot more people than that bought The Vacationers. But I think even if people hadn't bought it, I still would have learned the same lesson, which is that it feels so much better to me to write books that are in my voice with my sense of humor, and that it just felt right. It just felt right to me.
Yeah, it's interesting, when you mentioned that, actually, it does feel that, I guess it's not any different for a writer than it is for, I don't know, an athlete or anybody else. It's like you look at that first book and there does seem to be a tonal shift when you get to that second one, where it's maybe just like you kind of found something.
Yeah.
And when you look at Modern Lovers and Vacationers and All Adults Here, they're obviously very different books, but there seems to be a, I guess, for lack of a better word, like a confidence or I don't know what the word is, but it just seems like.
Well, I think it is a world. I mean, it's a, I mean, they are different. They are different books, obviously, because they're about different things. But they do, those three novels do have this thread in common, which is the voice. And yeah, I mean, and it's pleasurable to me, like, and I think that the older I get and the more responsibilities that I have, to my children, to my bookstore, to the rest of my life, the more I want to get pleasure out of writing. And like, I'm not interested in giving myself a task. I'm interested in giving myself joy.
And do you find that when you're doing these projects?
Yes. I mean, I think that writing for me is really different now. I mean, right now it is different in that I'm not doing any of it, because I'm alone for 10 hours a day with my 4-year-old and 6-year-old. And there's no writing, and they wake up at 5. And so it's just not happening now, and that's okay. But before the pandemic, I had a pretty nice setup where, I mean, a busy setup where I was splitting my weeks, splitting the days between the bookstore and writing. But when it was a day to write, I was always so happy, because I feel like, art, like I don't go to yoga class anymore. I don't see my friends as much as I'd like. There are all of these things that I don't do to really take care of myself, because I have all these other responsibilities. But writing is the one thing that I can do for myself, and because I get paid for it, that I am required to make time for, which is really nice. Thank you to Riverhead Books for paying me, because otherwise it would be a lot harder.
Yeah. I wonder, it seems like the central crisis at the heart of the book in a lot of ways is kind of this crisis of confidence about parent, am I a good parent? What am I exposing my children to? Have I brought them into this world that's, I don't know, am I shepherding them through this world in the correct way? And I was thinking about that. Of course, you have 2 kids, and that's something that I think that every parent deals with. I wonder if you felt similar feelings about the bookstore during the pandemic.
Every day.
That responsibility, yeah.
Every day, all day long. I mean, I think that, yeah, I mean, in the same way that if you have, one child with a broken leg, you're going to pay more attention to that one for the time being, because they need your help more. That is certainly how we feel right now with the bookstore, where, it has been, every day we're making decisions that we're not sure about, but, you have to make a decision one way or the other. And so, you know, you have to, I mean, it is exactly like having children. Like you have to, you know what your goals are and, you know, where your heart is, and then make the best decision, what feels like the best decision for the moment. You know, I mean, I think that we are all, that's what we're all doing. And, you know, we all have different situations and different, yeah, I mean, and I think that it's really hard to be the boss. You know, it's really hard in these kinds of situations to be the one who is making those decisions, and to say, this is how we're going to handle it, you know. And yeah, I mean, it is really hard. And you know, one thing that I have come to recently, with the protests and all the talk about racism in the country, you know, like a lot of other people, I've been reading a lot more about race and white supremacy and racism and anti-racism. And one of the things that I've been finding really comforting is also applicable in as a business owner, which is that you have to try, that like you have to try to do the right thing, and to be aware and to be conscious, but that it's also, that it's not an on-off switch, you know, that it's a process, and that it's a process that will take the rest of your life. And even then, you know, that we're all unlearning things simultaneously as we learn new ones, and that making mistakes is part of it, you know. And I mean, that really is what the book is all about too, that like, you know, the Astrid Strick, who's the matriarch of this family, sees someone get hit by a bus in the first sentence, and then it sort of starts this cascade of responses, and where she feels like she's not done as good a job as she wanted to as a parent, and she wants to fix some old mistakes. And then, of course, she realizes that the mistakes that she thought she made weren't the mistakes that her children were really upset about, in the long run. And that, you know, sort of acknowledging things and trying to deal with them is the thing. Like that's the work of it. You know, whether you're talking about trying to dismantle your, you know, what you've been socialized into seeing as normal, or how to handle running a business in a pandemic, or your own children, you know, I think it all comes down to that same sort of like not being afraid of failure, sort of embracing failure, and kind
of cutting yourself a break, but maintaining the good intentions, you know?
Yeah. And just like not allowing failure, and stumbles to stop you from progressing forward.
Right. You know, you mentioned that there's a bus accident, that's kind of an inciting moment of the book. I hate this question, but I'm going to ask it anyway, which is, that's very specific, and I wonder if you had seen something or had been around something like that triggered that moment for the book.
No, I haven't. But you know what is so funny? I mean, not funny at all.
Strange.
Strange, is that one person who interviewed me about the book right when it came out said to me, luckily it was a taped interview, so it wasn't live, so he ended up editing it out, but he said, now the bus, the novel starts with a bus accident. Your father, who is also a novelist, he was hit by an automobile as a child. Is that where this came from? It's like, no, it's not. And
Is
then
that true? Is that true that he was hit by a
it
car?
is true. It is true, but it literally never, it just has absolutely nothing to do with it. But then a woman wrote me after the book was out, after the book came out, and said that she had a family member who was hit by a school bus in somewhere in Wisconsin. And I had lived in Wisconsin. I went to grad school in Wisconsin, and she asked me if I'd heard about it, or if I'd read about it, if I'd seen anything, and I said, "No, God, I'm so sorry, that I'm so sorry that these specifics, hit you there somewhere." So
Triggered, kind of a triggering.
yeah. But because no, I mean, it was really from my imagination, but you just never know. And I mean, to me, that is, I mean, speaking of magic and books, I think that's one of the things that's amazing about books, is that, the writer only does half of it, and that the reader does the rest. So whoever is reading whatever book, they are bringing to those pages everything else in their life. And, for me, that often means that I get notes from, I mean, with this book in particular, I get notes from a lot of parents who are saying, oh yeah, that is me too. Or, people see themselves in books. But yeah, it's not always in ways in which you anticipate, which is interesting.
Yeah. I'm going to take a moment to do a commercial here, which is to say, if you don't have a copy of All Adults here, you can go into our chat here and you can see a direct link. You can buy a copy right there. And, hey, there it is. Beautiful cover, by the way. You've had a run of these solid covers. Riverhead does amazing covers. So,
They do.
So anyway, back to our regularly scheduled programming. So I'm still trying to actually, now that you've said this, it's like jumping around in my mind, which is the fact that your father, Peter Straub, and Stephen King, who have been friends and collaborators for decades, were both hit by cars. I'm trying to figure out.
Yeah, it's true.
What a strange bonding moment. That's very strange. I had no idea.
Yeah. Yeah.
Not what to say, other than that's just a weird thing. So I'm curious, you having a dad who was a writer and a great writer, you grew up around books and bookstores, of course, but your kids have actually grown up in a bookstore. And I'm curious, do they think of it as a direct extension of home? Like, do they have any sense of it being a business? Do they know, or is it just like, this is our extra space we go to?
I mean, right now, I will say that right now, where they're not going into any other spaces other than our house and the bookstore. So I think right now it literally is,
it's their third place,
like another room in our house. But yeah, I don't know, I mean, they love pushing the buttons on the computers. They love scanning things. We went there today and they each picked out a couple of things, and they take turns scanning. And they love, I mean, just like any kid, they know exactly where their books are, the books that they're interested in. And yeah, but I think unlike
it's like basically a big toy store for them,
it is, only it's better because we don't say no.
Yeah.
I don't know how much they understand about that we actually do buy their books there. Like, I mean, they understand that they can't just take them, like that there is a process. But but yeah, I mean, we buy a lot of books, but you know, like, I mean, I guess my feeling about it is that like, you know, I limit candy and I limit toys. And before the pandemic, I limited screen time. Um, but I don't want to put a limit on books.
No,
You know, there's no limit on books in our house. Every room in our house is filled with books, and that's what I want. You know, I mean, you know, I think that, you know, like in the book, um, you know, I think that I question my parenting 1,000 times a day, but the one thing that I definitely know that I am doing at least a decent job at is making sure that my children's lives are filled with books, and all different kinds of books by all different kinds of writers and featuring all different kinds of characters. You know, I think that that is such an easy way to to like start the work of being a good human.
you know, you often hear about people saying that the remedy for prejudice or bigotry or anything is travel, right? Getting outside of your bubble. Well, you know, books are that, right? Because in some ways, and of course they cost, but with a library or anything, there's less barriers. And you know, not everyone has the ability to travel much, but this is a way you can get the same result.
Yeah.
That's very much like Mr. Rogers talk, but we don't. That's okay.
No, but it's true. I mean, I think that, I'm sorry. I think that, you know, books absolutely build empathy because they put you inside someone else's world and someone else's head. I mean, that's, you know, I mean, I'm a fiction reader, really. I mean, I read some nonfiction, but, you know, maybe 25% of my reading is nonfiction. But I mean, yeah, for my money, fiction
Can't beat it.
is the best.
So are you kind of, do you romanticize the idea of like your kids working in the bookstore when they're older teens, or like, are you going to pass the bookstore down the line? Is it going to be like this kind of thing that's run for years? And do you like,
Oh,
do
I
you
don't
ever think about that kind of stuff? I guess right now we're just on a day-to-day kind
Yeah,
of.
I mean, I guess, you know, the people who I know who have grown up in bookstores, I mean, I know a few, but only one of them, my friend Susanna Hermans, who is at Oblong Books in Rhinebeck, New York. She is now a co-owner with her dad, and they run it together. But yeah, I mean, I think that I wouldn't want to put pressure on that, just like I wouldn't want to put pressure on my children to become writers. You know, I think that I want them to be happy. And running a small business is really hard and very particular. And I don't know, I wouldn't, I would not, I wouldn't want to make them think that that was like my hopes and dreams.
Yeah.
You know, I think that they would each be good at it differently. And I'm sure that when they are a little bit older, we will give them jobs in the bookstore. I'm sure. I'm very, very anxious to put them to work.
Yeah.
But I think like in terms of the long run, it's a no pressure environment.
I'd like to kind of end our discussion with one of my favorite topics, which is about categorization in bookstores and the problem within that. And specifically about your books, which is, you made me think about this because you were talking about The Vacationers, and you mentioned that you didn't know why it was successful because maybe it had this cool cover that was like this blue beachy cover, and maybe it just appealed to people on a really gut level. But I do wonder, I think your books have justly avoided the chick lit vibe, which I hate so much, and have kind of still had a foot in that kind of literary fiction world. But they do benefit from, like, you know, they're sold at Target and they're sold at Walmart and these kind of places. So you kind of get some of that push from like beach read, that kind of popular fiction space, but you still have kind of the respect of the fiction writer. And I think that's so very hard to do. And so much of it is about how we think about where we put books, what we call them. I mean, does it drive you crazy how we kind of put everything into little boxes? Now in the bookstore, we need labels and we need to show people where things are. But I've seen some bookstores go crazy with it and try different things where nothing is really categorized. But
Yeah.
what do you think about that stuff?
I mean, I guess, my dad, I think my dad always had real feelings, like pretty deep feelings about being read in a certain way and not in a different way. Even though you could not open one of his books and read a page and not understand that he was a very serious, very literary writer. That would be impossible.
But he was put into the horror box.
Right. He was put into a certain box. But I mean, maybe because he's much more literary than I am, it doesn't bother me so much. Like I think that, I benefit from being on these beachy, woo, fun times lists. And, and my books are funny and there is love in them and all of that stuff. And I think that, I guess, I don't know. I mean, I think that it's, do I sometimes wish that certain places would take me more seriously? Yeah, sure. But I guess I want to be read. I think that some writers don't care about that. But I do, and I want to be read by lots of different kinds of people. And I think that, I don't know, I'm not a snob. I have a lot of, not to put my snobby writer friends on notice, but I do have a lot of friends who are snobby and who wouldn't want to be. I don't know. I just like, I like that I appeal to a wide variety of people. And that I do enjoy, like, to me, a beach read, what that actually means is a pleasure read. That's what that means to me. And I think that if people are reading my books for pleasure, there is no greater compliment. I don't want to be a homework assignment. I don't.
There's a fascinating episode, and I think it's on Charlie Rose, who I think has subsequently been canceled, so forgive me for bringing him up. But there's an episode from like the late 80s or early 90s that I think is online somewhere. And it's really a panel of publishing people discussing how they invented the term beach read. And like how it was a total marketing.
Yeah.
And it's probably one of the most successful marketing tools ever created. But it's really interesting kind of how we, I think how we think about things and how it affects who we are. I guess my point being that, I will often have people come to events, or I'll do an event, for a certain novelist, and the audience will be 95% female, or it'll be 85% male, and I hate sometimes that I can kind of guess that beforehand, if it's a nonfiction World War II book, it's, that's going to skew very male. And I think we're missing out on things, I think we miss a lot of good stuff because we're kind of living in these weird bubbles. I'm not sure. I wonder what role does the marketing side play in helping expand that? And I guess this actually leads into a broader discussion about like race and reading people outside of not just gender, of course, but like life experience and how we can think about that.
Yeah, I think it's so important. I think that, there are so many, dads who on Father's Day get a presidential biography or a book about grilling or
Eric Larson.
or an Eric Larson book, right? And I mean, Eric Larson is great, and there are a lot of great presidential biographies and good books about grilling. But why not give your dad Zadie Smith essays?
Right.
Like, why not give your dad something cool that he can then, where he can expand his horizons? I mean,
Yeah.
I always give my dad books because that I I only give everybody books. But he loves poetry. And so what's been really fun for me is giving him books by young poets who he might not have come across, yeah, I think
That's such a great thing, actually. You mentioned that. I think that's being in the book selling world. Is there anything that feels better than recommending something to someone who you don't know really, and you've kind of maybe just taken a little bit of a temperature on who they are, and they maybe told you a few things, and then you kind of throw something into their world, and then the next time you see them, somehow their life is different because now it might be incremental, maybe
yeah.
it isn't, but it's because of you, and you kind of planted a seed, and that's a pretty amazing feeling. I mean, is that one of your favorite parts about the book
Oh,
selling
I
life?
love it. I love it. I love how bossy you can be as a bookseller, and how being really opinionated is just a plus. Um, yeah, and how you can, I mean, in my experience, I mean, maybe it's because, I don't know, people know I'm the boss and they feel pressure to buy what I tell them because like my books are all there staring at them or something. I don't know, maybe. But I think that it's really, I mean, it's just, there's nothing that I love more. I mean, I'm not, when I'm in the bookstore, I'm not usually on the floor. Like I'm usually there because I have buying meetings or some other meetings, or there's some specific thing that I have to take care of. But my favorite part of being in the bookstore is just being on the floor, just talking to whoever walks in about what they want to read, and like petting their dog and smooching the baby. That's the
Yeah,
best.
there's nothing better than like someone who comes in hungry, just wanting, and you can tell they want something. Like
Yeah.
I need a good. There's nothing better than hearing someone say, "I need a good read. I need something."
Yeah.
Good to read." Yeah, it's pretty amazing. My last question is a really stupid question, which is always a good way to end. Which is, did it take you any time to get comfortable with merchandising your own books in your bookstore?
So,
How to do it in a way that
so
wouldn't seem
Anne,
mess? Yeah.
so Anne Patchett um, came early on to visit, and she was like, Emma, what are you doing? You need a whole shelf.
She has one for sure. Yeah.
She has a case.
Yeah,
She
it's
has
like
a
a
whole
whole
bookcase. But
10-foot case.
she has a lot more books than I do. I think she has 9 books, and I've only got 5, or maybe she's even got more than that. But yeah, no, she told me in no uncertain terms that I needed to just like block off a space that was just for my books.
Yeah.
And so I did that because I do everything she tells me to do. And yeah, no, I mean, I am a shameless person. And I have to be because I'm a writer and I own an independent bookstore. So like if I'm not going to sell my books, then who is? I mean,
Yeah,
it's
no,
all
it's a
part of it. It's all the two are symbiotic, and I know that we get a lot of attention at the store because I'm a writer, and we're included in various like bookstore roundup things, because the bookstore is wonderful. But just like Anne, I mean, only less so because Anne is the queen. We get included in a lot of stuff because I'm a writer, and so I know that it is also a reason that people come, and so
That's another good, actually, a follow-up to that point too, is do people always expect you to be there? And are they disappointed ever if you're not? Because they think, hey, I'm gonna go see Emma at the bookstore. If you're not
I
there.
mean, sometimes I get little notes from people, like, someone who I went to elementary school with or summer camp with or something like that. But no, people are very understanding.
She's here, yeah, exactly.
I think people understand that I have 2 small children and have another job, and
Yeah.
they're always generous with me.
Well, I feel there is no shame in me saying, of course, that you guys all need to read All Adults here. And if you haven't read, like we were talking about, if you haven't read any of Emma's work before, if this is the first book you've read, like we said, this, you're entering a world you will enjoy, and you need to go check out the backlist as well. And God knows we have time to be reading a lot right now. So let's, and also, like Emma said, she's not like 20 books deep. You can do the oeuvre. You can pull up the whole Emma Straub. Get it done. You can get it done. So buy your copy. There's links in the chat. Thank you all for watching, and I want to say a big thank you to Emma for joining us and taking some time.
Thank you. I look forward to coming to Tulsa someday in reality.
Yes, we will do it. We will do it, or whatever the next thing is. All right, everybody, take care, stay safe.
Thank you so much, Jeff.
Bye-bye. Thank you. Bye.